Hello, everybody, and welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. Today, your toaster's divorced, but how's its money mindset?
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Seth Nelson. As always, I'm here with my good friend, Pete Wright. Divorce can be messy. It leaves individuals feeling lost and overwhelmed, especially when it comes to navigating personal finance. Today, we're looking at the psychological impact of divorce on financial decision-making. How do you replace your financial partner? How are you supposed to know what to do when the post-divorce money situation gets complicated? Ben Hockema is a certified financial planner who has helped countless individuals rebuild their lives after divorce. Ben is here today to help us through all of that and more. Ben, welcome to the Toaster.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Seth.
I am sure last night, Seth saw his calendar today was going to be a money-related podcast, and he just put his laptop up on his bedside table, opened a blank spreadsheet, and just let it lull him to sleep. This is a fever dream podcast for Seth Nelson, and I'm so excited you're here, Ben, because we're going to talk about how our brains, how our mindset changes in a divorce. There is something that we're getting in that I don't think we've ever used the words replacing your financial partner. I always hear financial planner. It's hard to read, but I just realized there's a financial partner. Oh my God.
And in some of those partners, we're not good.
Yeah, bad partners. So we're going to talk all about that and give us a to-do list of what we need to do when we get a divorce. But I want to start with the change in financial psychology that you deal with when you're working with clients who are going through a divorce. We understand divorce is messy. What does that do to your brain and money?
I talk to my clients, whether they're divorced, single, in a happy marriage, whatever it looks like. Most of money is psychological. There's only a little bit that's on a spreadsheet, and everyone tries to focus on the numbers first. But in my experience, it's all about how you feel about money and how you feel about your relationship with money. And I really believe that there's a relationship with money. Well, when you go through a divorce, you have a complete change in who's in that relationship with money. So I'll give you kind of an example. So my wife and I are opposites when it comes to how we view about money. I am much more on the opportunity and risk-taking side. And that's part of why I'm an entrepreneur and have my own business. And she is as far to the other extreme as possible. Well, what that means is as we approach our money in our relationship today, we're trying to meet in the middle and have a compromise that's there. Well, take one of us away if we were to get divorced. Now we have a completely different relationship on how we're going to think about money, think about opportunities, think about scarcity, think about what could go wrong, all the things that are already there, throw in a stressful situation. And now your relationship with money will change. And that's not even, getting on things like financial abuse, which I know you've had someone on recently talk about and things like that. But there's so much about your relationship with money. We think about the personal relationships. You got a money relationship too.
You just said something that I want to drill down on a little bit. Scarcity. Let's talk a little bit about your experience watching people and the way they change as they think about and experience scarcity.
So I like to frame it in, people have one of three main relationships with money. So one is, I feel wealth or money about opportunity, as I kind of already mentioned. A lot of people fall in the security side. I have felt scarcity. I have felt that money can only go so far, and I want to make sure I feel secure with that in my situation. And the last one is a vulnerability, which we can touch on. But when we talk specifically about scarcity, most people, as you go through any sort of turmoil and traumatic experiences, just naturally biologically inclined to go towards a safer mindset. So somebody who was more opportunistic before will now say, I have scarce resources. I have less things that I can do with my money. Maybe, I've got half the income or whatever it looks like. I need to focus on my security first before I think about what I used to be thinking about of the trips we could take or what retirement looks like. Now I'm just worried about how am I going to get by in the next week or month or year. And that that is, again, a big change as you go through divorce of trying to handle that security side before you build off of that. Build a nice rebuild your foundation, so then you can build from there to whatever the future holds.
Well, and this is the question really for both of you, but that I know that the scarcity mindset is one that can really trick you, right? That you can move because of a high stress situation when you are otherwise compromised emotionally. Scarcity can define decisions you make that you may not otherwise make. And that doesn't necessarily have to be around money. I'm curious how, like, maybe Seth, does that ring anything true for you? Just the way people relate to scarcity and loss?
Absolutely. It happens all the time. And what I mean by that is we'll have a case, and when you're dividing assets and debts, the best I can do is get you half your stuff. And if that was your security, you're now
half secure,
really concerned. Right. And if you were the non-working spouse and now you need alimony, you're terrified. You're terrified you're not going to have the same standard of living. And we've talked about it. I think, this is a question really for Ben, is what we've said is go look at new housing. Because people covet what they see and they just think, I got to be in this house for the kids or that. But when you do the math, you just can't afford it, right? And you've gotten this standard of living. Go see if there's something else out there that maybe you can afford, that you can create a nice home for you and your family. So I see it all the time. And when people are scared and they feel like they're drowning, they just grab onto a life vest. And that life vest is money. And people will spend a lot of money on attorney's fees and forensic accountants and litigation fighting over money. So we try to define how much are we arguing about before we start arguing about it, because the math has to work on that.
It's a fascinating mental model for me to wrap my head around, because I know how I relate to scarcity. I'm not divorced, but I know how I relate to scarcity, particularly in a time of grief. And it leads to this sort of next area that I wanted to talk to you about, which is, we mentioned the financial partner. I think the reason that struck me as funny is because I don't think I've ever thought of it as a separate identity, that you have this sort of emotional partner, you have your former spouse, that they were also a financial partner doesn't necessarily mean, or I should say, I guess implies in my head that there might be another divorce that you have to process in addition to the one where you're emotionally separating. But separating the part that helps you deal with money might be a whole separate kind of emotional process. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Absolutely. I mean, I said financial partner, and I know you mentioned that. Really, it came from one of my clients I still work with today. She, maybe 15, 20 years ago, was divorced, and my business partner worked with her and her ex-husband and went through that process, and she stayed with us. She has referred to me as her financial husband multiple times. The way she looks at the way that we talk about money is she's got ideas she would have talked to her husband about, of, I want to, I'm thinking about spending money on this car, or I think I want to go on this trip, or I think I want to retire. And she has no one to bounce the ideas off of. And so now she's looking to me as be that person.
The surrogate.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Be the sounding board. She has no one else that she feels she can be that vulnerable with. Money's a very vulnerable topic. And so I think that's something I've seen with all my divorce clients is, and also widowed clients. I think there's some similarities there where you are losing that person you relied on to help either reinforce what you believed or be the, as it is in my house, tell me where I'm wrong. You need that person to bounce ideas off of.
Or they handled it.
Absolutely.
You had no idea. I get calls all the time from what I think generally people would say are high net worth divorces in the millions or tens of millions of dollars. And one spouse will say, I don't know what we have.
It's all the time.
Literally, I don't know what we have. I always educate people. It's very important to know what you have. Where is the money coming in? Where is it going out? But if you don't, it's okay. We will find it. We'll do the analysis and we'll help you make the best legal decisions you can. But as I always say, Pete, and Ben, you're going to hear it here for the first time from me. I can only help people in what I can get them in a legal sense. I can't tell them what it will do for them in their life. And that's why we need guys like Ben out there.
Reflect for me just a minute on the stages of undoing the experience with let's say a poor financial partner. Because everything you're describing to me sounds like there are going to be some stages as you process figuring out a renewed relationship with money. Can you walk us through, for those listening, in a way that might help them see themselves?
It starts with a grieving process, honestly. And I think a lot of people just skip over that. You don't realize the loss that you're experiencing. And especially with the financial partner side, right? You think of it emotionally and you think of loss of your identity or whatever else, but there's a loss on the finances. And I would agree in some ways, Seth, to what you said about, go look for a house. At the same time, we want to avoid making irrevocable decisions that are going to really impact multiple years of, your financial life if you don't have a plan in place. And so having that space to have, some of that grieving process and go through the psychological impact of the loss of all of the things you're dealing with is kind of step one, as I've always seen it. And so I feel, for instance, in my experience, my role is to help say, you're going to be okay for 6 months. Let's not make any big decisions. And just let them live their life and figure it out and be the sounding board and have you say, hey, I got this in the mail. I've never even seen this before. What does this look like? Just to educate. Once you kind of get through, and for different people, it's 6 months, some it's 2 years before you can really move on and say, now we're going to completely put everything away of what the plan was before. So if you were working with me before, we had a financial plan, we had a multi-decade plan in place. All that is going in the garbage bin. We're going to start completely fresh. And so I start with all my clients, whether divorced or just a new client that walks in the door, with what I call the $1 billion question. And the $1 billion question is, if I had $1 billion, and I use that number because no one could actually spend all that money. If I had $1 billion, what would your life look like? And go through that exercise and ask a lot of those questions. The reason I start there is take money off the table as the scarce resource. What do you want your life to be? And let's talk about what those things are. And now that you're divorced, let's talk about what that means in who you are today, not who you used to be. And so let's reset, have that conversation. Now we have to put the limiting factor of money. We don't have $1 billion, but let's add.
We've got $3 billion.
There you go. Love that. Love that. Seth, you should give me a call.
See, before, when he thought I had crap finances, he's like, let's get off the podcast as soon as possible.
As fast as we can. You're right.
Now that I got $3 billion, he wants to talk a little more.
Right. You're reading me pretty well there. I see how that works. But let's build the plan so that it works and make sure it's actually the plan that you want. So I really see kind of those two stages. It's the grieving process, but then you got to start over. It's a brand new plan. So let's not regret what we had. Let's just move forward.
What are the surprises? I have to imagine that and I'm saying this really quite timely because I had this conversation with my mother, who is grieving the loss of her husband, my father, 2 years ago. Grief is a funny thing. It's a funny roller coaster. And I think she lives in a constant stress about money. And we did a screen share this morning and looked at her assets. And I got out a calculator and I kind of did the math in front of her just to let her know things are okay. But I think there was a grief shroud between her and the calculator, and she could not see it. And so I'm curious, what are the surprises that you find you run into when you do this kind of activity with people and, they come to an awareness of the reality of their situation?
So I will answer your question, but I'll answer it with more questions to start.
Please.
So if you're comfortable sharing, Pete, I want to dive a little bit more into what you're talking about there, because do you have any sense for what her biggest fear is? Like, what is she afraid of? Is she afraid to run out of money? Is she afraid of paying the bills tomorrow? What does it look like?
Yeah, she's 75 years old and she's afraid of living until she's 105.
Okay. And you believe with the calculator she can do it.
I believe that she, based on her current expenses and the sort of budget that I have put out for her that she never looks at, but at least I have a sense of her burn rate and I have a sense of her income. And I look at those numbers and I think, okay, I think you're going to be fine. But, she's also working with a financial planner. Believe me, I'm not the be all end all. I'm just trying to make her feel a little bit calmer.
I did the same thing, Pete, with my dad. And Ben, my dad just passed away a few months back. And his fear, he was going to run out of money. That was his fear. And literally, I did the same thing Pete's talking about. I said, this is what you have. This is what you're spending on a monthly basis. This is what it will last you if you just put it in the mattress and the mattress didn't burn, right? Like no investment. I didn't complicate things.
Let's not put it in a CD at 5% at all. Let's just
do the math, right? And that was actually one of the things that sparked him to move to an assisted living facility because we had 24-hour care. And when he realized that having that care was the burn rate and how long his money was going to last him was dramatically shorter than what he thought. He was like, okay, we need to do something. And that's what sparked the move. And right when he made the move, his money was going to outlive him. But it was a fear factor of running out of money.
Fear factor, right.
Yeah. Well, and part of why I ask those questions is what you're describing is the majority of my experience, which is most people are afraid of, and they don't use these terms, but they're afraid of running out of money. And even if you show them the numbers, if they're not number oriented, they're not engineers, they don't like the spreadsheets, they don't want to think about it. What they're not saying is inflation, costs going up. Yeah, you said on paper I can do it if expenses are the same, but what if it gets more expensive? Then what do I have to do? And then long-term care. Those are the two biggest pieces that I've always seen. And I think the most important thing is recognizing who you're talking to in that case, or if it's, you, if I'm speaking to you right now, are you someone who the spreadsheet's going to give you that feeling of security, that's all you need? You need to know that the projection works. Or are there some things you're not sharing with the people in your corner that are really the fears? It's not that the numbers don't work. It's there's something I'm not telling you that I'm afraid of. And spending the time to open up your mind to what that could be and really articulate that. There's a lot of ways to protect. If someone says long-term care, I can say, okay, we can get insurance. You can self-insure by putting it in a special account over here. We can do assisted living that's already got some built in. Like there's a lot of things we could do once we know that's your concern. But until you've articulated it or you even know what it is yourself, we can't help address and let you move forward with your life.
Talk more about that. Like, because the question is like, who are you lying to? Are you lying to me or are you lying to yourself? Right. Like, but what does it take you're sitting across from somebody and you have a suspicion that you're not getting the whole story? What does it take to unlock that for people? I mean, at this point, you're a counselor more than a financial planner.
Yes. And it helps that my sister is a therapist and I've had a therapist in my own life and lots of mentors who've helped on that. It really goes in the therapy side, I think, of whether you have your own therapist or a financial planner who knows how to speak in this way, whatever it looks like. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked in a lot of different ways. I like the, kind of 6 whys framework, and I forget where this came from, but okay, why is that important to you? And then they answer the question, and then you say, okay, but why do you feel that way? And you just ask why 6 times, and eventually they get down to the real heart of it, of why is that important, or why do they feel that way? And that I think that's a really helpful framework to just keep asking to the point of people get annoyed with me. But then we know, and then once it's in the open, now you can address the actual problem and not just use the spreadsheet. That
Ben, do you think most people know what they're afraid of, or it's through the conversation that it comes to light?
I think most people, especially if you've gone through a recent event, divorce, widow, whatever, you don't know why you feel the way you feel. And there's nothing you can do about that. Have someone who can listen and you can ask the questions.
Because I am terrified. I am so fearful that I'm going to have to be doing this podcast for 30 years with Pete. Like,
it's so weird. We've never talked about it, but that's exactly mine too.
Right?
Great. That's great.
So literally, it's so interesting that you're saying this because I'm thinking about how I can use this to better serve my clients, because I talk to them about the numbers all the time. And I have some clients that will dig in on the spreadsheet and others are like, just tell me what it says. Like they can't even deal with it. But I do have conversations around grief and fear about, okay, what's most important to you? What are you, is it the house? Why is it the house? Well, I want to keep the kids in a good school district. Okay. Is there another way to do that? Maybe he can stay in the house and then you can move. But if you do that, maybe you get more retirement. And I always tell people, you need money now and you're going to need money in the future. So getting retirement is not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a good thing if you don't touch it.
Right.
If you don't withdraw it, right? And I find that, to your point, Ben, is a lot of them are just like, how do I get past Tuesday?
Right. Absolutely. The way that we talk, all of our clients, when they become a new client, I say something like this of, I am working for two people in this situation. I'm working for you today, and I'm also working for who you will be in 20 years. Hopefully we're still working together. But we have two clients, and we have to balance those two clients. And part of my job is knowing how to balance between planning for the future and living for today. But a lot of people, you're just looking for Tuesday, right? It's how do I get by? And so you're only focused on the next week. And I think as advisors as a whole, anyone working people in this situation, it's about adding that longer term perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. My mom lives in Colorado, and her number one concern right now is the fact that in winter, she's paying $400 a month for snow removal for her house. It's winter. That seems like a predicted expense, and she'll make it up in the spring, right? But that reality, when she's writing those checks, because she still writes checks,
right,
is the thing that puts her in that trance of scarcity, right? In that she feels like that $400 is representative of all her savings because she cannot fathom numbers with more than 2 zeros behind them.
And as we bring this all back to, what the podcast is about, if you're the spouse that has never had to handle the money, my wife's in that situation. If we ever got divorced, she wouldn't know what to do. She wouldn't know where we pay bills. Now, I have given her access to see everything, and I actually have a meeting with her once a year so she knows where everything is. We have a net worth statement, and I'm a financial planner. I got to have it all documented.
He puts it up on the fridge right next to the kids' pictures that they do at school, Pete. It's so neat.
It is.
He grades himself in crayon too.
Yeah, and he color codes it, and then he freaks out because his kid turns it upside down and all the arrows are going the wrong way. And Ben doesn't know what to do before he has his coffee in the morning.
That's right. That's why you got a color code. So the green, even if it's pointing the wrong way, the green is up.
Green is good.
Green is good. So we're good there. But she wouldn't know what to do if something happened. And most people that I work with, that's the spouse they were. They don't know what they don't know. They don't even know where to begin. And there's a very easy way for someone to be taken advantage of if they found the wrong advisor or the wrong person to help them.
No, it's a problem.
It's a big deal. And so that $400, Pete, that feels like a big expense. And you look over a year and you say that's not enough to move the needle in the situation, so you shouldn't worry about it. But she doesn't have probably the ability to think of money from a bigger picture perspective. And so that's going to be a fear, and that is pretty typical, I think.
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, you're describing your relationship with your own wife is my mom and dad. Like she had some visibility, but my dad moved just faster, and he rehabilitated homes, and he was into real estate, and he had a job, and he just did a lot of things. And there was no way for her to keep up. So when he passed, his financial house as a representation of the family's financial house wasn't completely in order. Like he didn't have a lot of debt, but things were in motion that balls were in the air that we had to catch. And she was, I think she was in the wind, which amplified her financial anxiety. And I just feel like that, when we talk about divorce, we talk about any situation of compromise, grief, that makes it feel like the balls go up as balls and they come down as pumpkins.
And I think there's something you can do, but the number one thing that I've seen is you should expect she's always going to feel anxious about money. There's things you can do to help, but that's not going to go away. She said 75 years of that relationship with money, it's not going to change now. And I'll tell a quick story. So I have a client, he passed away last year, but he was 97. And I'd worked between my partner and I, we worked with him for 35 years. And he would still talk about things that happened to him when he was 16 related to money that he didn't recognize impacted his view of money today. But I absolutely saw the connection to the way he talked about giving to his kids and how something that happened in his first job or maybe second job when he was 16 and how that impacted his relationship with money. It's a lifelong thing. And a lot of the formative years, your first interaction with money is going to impact the rest of your life. And so I think part of, as I try to look at it, is we can help sand on the surface, on the edges, I guess. But at the end of the day, she's probably always going to be a little bit anxious, and, helping her have a little less anxiety is beneficial, but you can't fix it.
And on that note, this is a learned skill, though. Managing your money is a learned skill. And I tell my clients, you're going to have the most financial freedom you're ever going to have, because this is going to be the first time that you're actually going to be doing it. And you're going to know where the money's coming in and going out. And that is empowerment. And, they're like, well, I don't even know how to set it up. I said, we'll get you to a good financial planner. All this stuff is online. You can do it a lot on your phone. So it's a learned skill. And that's always something I want people to take away from. I know you're dealing with a divorce. I know there is getting past Tuesday. This is something that will actually make you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to give us a to-do list, a checklist, a post-divorce financial checklist. And I want to hear what we need to do 8 a.m. day one. Before we do, I want to throw out a book, because I use the words, the Trance of Scarcity, and that is clumsy of me without mentioning that it is the title of one of my favorite books, the Trance of Scarcity, Stop Holding Your Breath and Start Living Your Life. And it really does define, Victoria Castle, author, she's delightful. It really does define helping to make the shift from seeing the world as one of scarcity to seeing the world as one of abundance. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing her a number of times on other podcasts, and I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It just is a really grounding experience. So if you find yourself in a space, not just financially, but seeing the world writ large as a place that is of scarcity, this is a reassuring text. So we'll put it in the show notes. Ben, 8 a.m. day one, I'm divorced. What do I do?
Day one, after your divorce, first financial thing you do.
And I know I sent you a few things, so if I missed something on here, let me know.
That's right, because this is actually a test. You didn't know that, but we're just here to embarrass you. So whatever we can do.
First financial thing you do, in my mind, is understand what you have. Right. So it's just
wrong. You've already been wrong.
You're already wrong. Based on your own list. We've got your answer key.
Wrong.
What's the first thing that we should do? Day one?
Pay your lawyer. Pay your lawyer. First thing.
Fair enough.
Come on now, Ben.
Okay. I felt like what happened day before. Okay, that's fine.
Or better yet, if you're a client of mine, you should be saying, moreover, I know I have money left in trust. Refund me my money left in trust. That's really what you should be doing. All right, okay. Go ahead, Ben.
That's all voodoo. What's the first thing?
That's great. Doing the best you can to understand what you have. Like that's day one. Where am I? What did I get out of this? Whether I understand it or not. What is this for? Can I pay my bills on Tuesday? That is day one, first thing. Once you've established that and you're comfortable with knowing what you have, now we can look at fixing the thing. So hopefully you've already checked the boxes of, hey, I changed my life insurance beneficiary designations, things like that. Unfortunately, I'm working with a client right now who is still dragging his feet 3 years later and still has his ex-wife on his life insurance. And
wow.
I remind him every time, but I don't have power of attorney. I can't do it. So,
wow.
But there are just some things like that you just, man, you just overlook and miss and move on with your life. You're like, I'm ready to be done.
The worrying is worse than the doing. Like when you have a stack of things that you just don't want to do, it just eats at you. And then when you finally sit down and get it done, it feels so good. And it's like, oh, it wasn't that hard, but it's a struggle for people.
Yeah.
So I would say that the first thing is you figure out what you have, and then your to-do list. Honestly, I think I'll rephrase what I said. What are the things on the stack that I have to get done, and work your way through that. So, okay, you get through those basic things. You go through the grieving process. We already touched on this. Now we think about what's possible, and there's so many ways that you can change your entire life now. You have more freedom to do it. Let's figure out what that looks like. And you have to be emotionally ready to have that conversation, that process. But that's broadly where you'd want to go. I know I sent you a few other things if there's anything I didn't.
You did it. Beneficiary updates. I'm still stuck. That one is stuck in my throat. Beneficiary updates, not making those for 3 years, because that underscoring the fact that you are aware that has to be done and you have not done it underscores how incredibly powerful the grief and loss is, and how weird it can be 3 years later still feeling that strongly about it.
Yes. And in this case, he's about to get married again, remarried. And
maybe that's what he's waiting for all along.
For a prenup. Is on the list.
There's a prenup on the list. Absolutely.
There we go.
That is for sure on the list. But the other thing I'll mention kind of relates to what we do, especially if you're not used to handling the money. Figuring out how to automate as much as possible is so helpful. So you don't have to write the checks every time. If you want to, if you're going to pay the mortgage and you have to pay it now, let's make sure it's set on auto pay. So you don't have to worry about it. If you're not used to worrying about it, figure out what the to-do list is and let's automate that. If you want to save for retirement, let's automate that. So it's happening behind the scenes and you never have to make the decision. Reduce as many decisions that you can screw up, whether it's intentional or unintentional. It's automation, I think, is key for everyone's financial health. Have a plan, automate it. And then when you need to, you adjust.
Ben, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today and giving us a little starter checklist that you passed. You did all right.
Thank you.
I love the automation on that. That's so smart.
It's so smart. Get it out of the way. I feel like just coming to understanding where you are in the stages of sort of financial grief is really important in the process of replacing your financial partner. Hits me right in the chest.
Love it.
Right in the chest. So thank you. Where do you want to send people to learn more about the work that you do?
Best way to learn more about me is just go to our website, illuminatewm.com. If you want to just skip reading about me and just schedule a free 20-minute call, doesn't cost anything, go to talkingwithben.com and you can just book directly on my calendar. And I'm happy to talk to people for 20 minutes for free. And then if there's something that needs to happen, we'll take it from there.
Outstanding. Ben Hockema, thank you so much for hanging out.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody else, it's time to turn to a listener question. Listener question. Seth, we've got a question from Anonymous, and it's a good one, and it's for something right in your backyard. Here we go. Can you please explain the new 50-50 custody law in Florida? Is this still applicable to infants and small children? What if it's a long-distance plan across the country? What is a typical long-distance parenting plan across country for an infant? Is it me, or are there multiple questions in there? Do we need to break that apart?
There are multiple. I'll handle them.
Okay.
This is like a typical Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
So it's good. So the new 50-50 custody law in Florida, it's called time sharing, but what the law says, and it went into effect July 1st, 2023, there is now a presumption of 50-50 time sharing for the parents.
That seems perfectly logical to me.
Well, I'm not a big fan.
Okay, tell me why I should not be either.
Because I think it is parent-focused, not kid-focused. The whole statute is best interest of the child. And then we say all of a sudden, we're not going to apply that. We're going to say you're starting at 50-50. I don't think you should start anywhere. I think you should figure out what's best for the kid, and where the chips fall, they fall.
Okay.
So it's a little mindset different. But that's what the law is. And it can be overcome. The presumption can be overcome when you overcome a presumption or anything in the law. There's different burdens. The highest burden that we all know of is beyond a reasonable doubt, the criminal standard. The lowest burden is preponderance of the evidence. So if you think of the scales of justice, it's just got to be a little bit more. You should be able to overcome it. That's not necessarily how the judges are applying it. They're saying, tell me something good, which this listener question, Anonymous, says two things. One is, what about infants and small children? That is not a reason to overcome a presumption. What that refers to is called the tender years doctrine. Wait, it's a little baby. Mom typically raises the babies or the little children. And this is historically how it happened. That tender years doctrine, saying that children should be raised more by the mom when they're infants or small children, has been abolished in Florida for many, many years. The other reason the Anonymous, I should say, mentions as a reason, what about a long distance parenting plan? Or if they're living across the country, and what is a typical one? That is a reason to overcome the presumption, because it physically will not work.
Right.
Right? You can't do a week on, week off with a parent in Tampa, Florida, and the other parent in LA.
Right.
So a typical, in quotes, long distance parenting plan, and I don't mean long distance just Florida to California. It could just be Tampa to Jacksonville or Miami, a 5-hour drive. Because once you get more than about 50 miles under the state of Florida statute, it's just not workable. And even sometimes across the bridge to St. Petersburg or Pinellas County, it might be 20 miles, but in traffic, you can't get the kid to and from school. You know, it's going to be an hour and a half in the car each way. So typically, the long distance parent, I'll call it, and that's the parent that doesn't have the child the majority of time during the school year. The long distance parent might get more time over the summer. If it's a 10-week summer, instead of having 5 weeks and 5 weeks, week on, week off, maybe that parent gets 7. Maybe they get 6. Maybe they get 8. They make up that time. Okay.
Now you got me thinking. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, fire away.
May it please the court. You said best interests of the parents, not best interests of the child, and suddenly taking the kid out of their home turf during the summer for all summer seems like best interests of the parent.
I appreciate that. The public policy of the great state of Florida, says the parent should be involved and the child should have a positive relationship with the parent. And the only way to do this, spend time with them. So it's more important to spend time with dad across the country than it is to spend time at a camp with your friends. And there's camps in other states that you can go to and make friends there.
Find a new camp. Good luck.
Exactly. So that might be one thing. Maybe the long distance parent gets every spring break. Then you have travel arrangements. And this is where it gets tricky with an infant. You can't just put them on a plane as an unaccompanied minor. So you've got a lot of travel back and forth. And who's going to do the travel? And remember, for every round trip ticket that infant goes on, there's 2 other round trip tickets that an adult is going on.
Yeah.
So it gets really expensive really quickly. Thankfully, you can bridge this gap a little bit because you have FaceTime now. So you can do more of that to keep the parent involved.
Are these technologies like FaceTime, Zoom, Signal, whatever, are these taken into account in decisions right now?
Yeah, I've had parenting plans that says long distance plan, you can FaceTime with your child every night for up to 15 minutes between the hours of 7:30 and 8:30, not to be disrupted by whatever. Sometimes it's twice a week or whatever the case may be. I also suggest on a long distance parenting plan that you have an online calendar to help put what the kid is doing. Because then the long distance parent can check the calendar and say, hey, you got a soccer game coming up. Or how was the math test that you took today? The more information you give to them where they can be asking questions about the child's life, not what are you doing in mom's house, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Then it's very helpful. So maybe more time in the summer, maybe every spring break. You look at holidays, Christmas and winter break, you usually switch those every year. Thanksgiving the same. Long weekends are a way where maybe a parent, the long distance parent, can fly in for the weekend and have time with the child. Now, look, they're going to want to like spend the time, but I always tell the long distance parent, when you're in town, part of being a parent is going to the soccer game and not being on your phone.
Yeah.
So part of being a parent is still letting the child have the sleepover at their friend's house, and maybe you drop them off a little late and pick them up a little early, but you can't always steal, in quotes, that time from them being kids. It's not their fault the parents got divorced. Just because the divorce shouldn't mean that they are not allowed to go to the sleepover with their friends on a birthday party.
Smart. Okay.
So Anonymous, I hope that helps.
Very thorough, Seth. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
You earned your stripes today.
Not my first day on the job.
I really appreciate that. And thank you again to Ben Hockema, who gave us a great tutorial on getting through the financial partner divorce. We sure appreciate everybody for downloading and listening to that. If you want to get your question on this show and you want our own fair Seth to answer that question, your legal question, visit howtosplitatoaster.com, click on the submit a question button. And it's a perfectly anonymous form. We don't care what you ask. We don't track you. Just leave us a question. We'll get it on the show in an upcoming episode this season. On behalf of Ben Hockema and Seth Nelson, America's favorite divorce attorney, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next week right here on How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships.
How to Split a Toaster is part of the True Story FM podcast network, produced by Andy Nelson, music by T. Bless and the Professionals and DB Studios. Seth Nelson is an attorney with NLG Divorce and Family Law with offices in Tampa, Florida. While we may be discussing family law topics, How to Split a Toaster is not intended to, nor is it providing legal advice. Every situation is different. If you have specific questions regarding your situation, please seek your own legal counsel with an attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. Pete Wright is not an attorney or employee of NLG Divorce and Family Law. Seth Nelson is licensed to practice law in Florida.